welcome all of you to another one of AFINet's webinars. We started in October 2020, apparently we will also continue to have webinars even if the pandemic hopefully will be over in the future. And we also had one virtual conference so far, and we are planning another virtual conference at the moment for next year, before we hopefully can have a face-to-face conference the year after in Rotterdam. And just two notes from my side. One thing is within the next days, the new newsletter of AFINet will be published. And this time we had slight difficulties in obtaining enough submissions. So we would strongly want to encourage all of you, if you have any material, ongoing projects dealing with AFINet related topics, send them to us in order for us to publish them in the next newsletter. This would be really helpful. Second issue, as you all know, we are intending to keep our webinars free, but still we're a small charity, so we would be grateful if anyone could give a small donation if you like to. No obligation, but it certainly helps. And now I'm very happy to introduce Justina Murray. She's the CEO of Scottish Families Affected by Alcohol and Drugs, which is a national charity that supports anyone concerned about someone else's drug or alcohol use. And Justina joined Scottish Families in June 2017 and was previously the Chief Officer of South West Scotland Community Justice Authority, which is a developed public body tasked with working in partnership to reduce reoffending. Prior to this, she was the coordinator of North Ayrshire Community Planning Partnership, following on from roles in public policy, equal employment opportunities, and research in Scotland and New Zealand. She has a PhD in social policy from the University of Glasgow, based on an exploratory study of models of empowerment in 8 Scottish community development projects. She's also on the board of North Ayrshire's Women's Aid and the Executive Governance Group for the Children's and Young People's Centre for Justice at the University of Strathclyde. Today's talk, entitled Ask the Family, Family Perspectives on Whole Family Support and Family Inclusive Practice in Scotland, will focus on a family engagement project commissioned in early 21 by the Scottish Government, aiming to test out a new set of national principles around whole family support and family inclusive practice. And like in all webinars, the talk will take for about 45 to 50 minutes, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and contribute to the debate afterwards. But now, at the moment, the floor is yours, and I'm very excited to hear your talk. Thank you very much for being here and supporting the webinars.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So I am working across 2 screens here, so if I look like I'm occasionally looking to the side, that's why. But thanks so much for the opportunity for an AFINet webinar takeover today. I really love speaking about our Ask the Family project, but often it's squeezed into sort of 10 or 15 minutes of a bigger event, so it feels like a real luxury to have that full 45 minutes today, plus some time for a chat at the end. So as Gallus said, Ask the Family was a project which was commissioned by the Scottish Government at the start of 2021. And that was on behalf of the Scottish Working Group on Whole Family Approaches and Family Inclusive Practice, which is a bit of a mouthful. And the project was led by Scottish families affected by alcohol and drugs, who I work for, but was carried out in partnership with 3 other third sector partners, Action for Children, Circle and All in the Family. And the national working group I mentioned was tasked with improving Scotland's support for families affected by alcohol and drugs. So similar to all of the countries reflected in AFINet, you know, there's a lot still to do to improve outcomes for families. So the project included children, young people and adults, and those affected by either their own substance use, for example, a parent using substances or a parent in recovery, as well as those affected by others' use. So what we were asked to do was that the group had drafted a set of national whole family approach and family inclusive practice principles, and we were asked to test those out with children, young people and adult family members. But specifically, we were asked to test them out with those who were already engaging with family support due to substance use. So as I said earlier, that was either their own or somebody else's substance use. In these 2 slides, this one and this one, list the draft principles as they were at that point. These were actually redesigned by one of my colleagues, but the text is the same. And I'm not going to go through it in detail because we'll share the slides afterwards. But, you know, in short, it's not exactly the most exciting thing to be asked to do, you know, to ask families to comment on a set of written principles. So we really had to be super creative about that. And so the Ask the Family Engagement Project was born. And 177 family members from Scotland took part in the project. It all took place earlier on this year, and then it was formally launched in the summer of 2021. And the project included a national survey and a conversation cafe and a whole series of engagement activities led by our project partners. And everyone really was creative and innovative. You know, everyone in the third sector knows that's what we do anyway. But it's great today to get the chance to share not just the findings, but also to take you on a little tour of our virtual exhibition. So going back to the draft national principles that are on the screen, we wanted to engage with families to really check these out in 2 directions. First of all, we wanted to check them out in a sort of top-down way. So how far do the draft principles as written chime with families? And then also in a bottom-up way, if we look at how families talk about whole family support and what matters to them, you know, how far is that reflected in the draft principles? So we started our project with a national survey, and that ran online for 3 weeks in January 2021, yes, nearly a year ago. And the survey was only open to family members aged 16 or over who were affected by substance use, either their own or someone else's, and who were already engaging with family support. So really quite a bespoke group. And the full survey findings are available at our Ask the Family website, and you'll also find a short animated version there. But as you can see from this slide, most of the people who responded were family members affected by other substance use at 86%, and the 1% other refers to workforce. We were pretty pleased with the spread we got across Scotland. This is a very Scottish slide for an international presentation, but these are all health board areas. And the only areas where we got no responses were unfortunately our island health authority areas. And it really made us reflect that next time we do a survey like this, we'll make sure that we really do more assertive outreach into the island areas just to get some feedback from them as well. Also, in terms of age group, we were pretty pleased to see the range of ages. And, you know, just seeing the split here, it probably does reflect the age groups who are more likely to engage with adult family support, you know, so the majority were 45 years or over. But it was good to see around a third, at 34%, were under 45 years too. So getting into the meat of the survey, if you like, we asked respondents to tell us the year that substance use first became problematic for them, and then also when they first accessed family support for the first time. So note that we didn't ask when they accessed good family support or the right family support, but actually any family support for the first time. And just 1 in 8 said that they reached support the same year that substance use became problematic. And of course, that could mean it still took 11 months and 29 days to reach support. The largest single group said it took between 1 and 5 years at 36%, but significant numbers were in excess of this, with 18% taking 16 years or longer to reach support. And what we found was, on average, at the time of the survey, family members said they'd been affected by problematic substance use for an average of 16 years, and it had taken them 8 years to reach support. So that's really a phenomenal length of time. And the shortest length of time was obviously 0 years, and the longest was 35 years. And we know, and I know AFINet members understand this really well, that family members often reach formal support only when things have really reached crisis point. It's an emergency, they're at breaking point, and all of their other supports and coping mechanisms and some of their informal support structures have fallen away. So the next thing we asked people to do was to tick off from a checklist the family and social relationships that they felt had been harmed by this substance use. And at Scottish Families, we take this really broad view of family, well beyond your immediate relatives, obviously to include friends, neighbours, work colleagues and so on. And interestingly, only 1% of respondents said nobody was harmed, and respondents ticked every single category of relationship, and they even added ones we hadn't thought of. For example, there's an other category there that included in-laws who we'd missed out. And we thought it was quite interesting that, there was quite high prevalence of some closer family members that you'd maybe predict, partners, children, adult children and so on, and parents. But also there was really high prevalence for some kind of wider social networks. So a third identified their friends being harmed, and a fifth identified neighbours and work colleagues. And so that really shows that negative impact of substance use on the wider social networks as well as immediate family. So we then sort of said to people, well, thinking about all of those people that you've ticked on the checklist, could you add them up? And at Scottish Families, we talk about the power of 5. So if you support a single adult family member, the positive benefits of that are going to extend to 5 members of their wider family or social network. However, when we asked our survey participants to add up all of the people who they thought were harmed by the substance use in each case, they came up with a much larger number. And on average, they counted that 11 people had been harmed for each individual using alcohol or drugs. And you can see that a third of participants identified more than 11 people harmed, up to as many as 80 people in one case. Rights, Respect and Recovery was published in 2018, and it's Scotland's alcohol and drug strategy. And in that it states the whole family needs support. So we've stolen this little graphic from the strategy. But the definition of a whole family approach wasn't actually included in the strategy. And indeed, that's one of the reasons why the National Working Group was established that I mentioned at the start. So we asked family members how they would define a whole family approach. And interestingly, a huge majority, 81%, felt that a whole family approach means that everybody in the family who needs it, including adults and children, should get a different kind of support depending on their needs. Nobody thought that only the person using alcohol or drugs should get support. Although we know actually, if you look at investment, that is where most money goes, into services for individuals. And, we asked people to add any further comments here, and I've put these 3 on the slide by way of illustration because I think they just really show the variety of views. So the first person is talking about the kind of jargony aspect of the whole family approach terminology. They're not too keen on it. And they say it sounds just a little bit like promoting holidays or games. It's fun for the whole family. The next person, really talks about the importance of everybody in the family getting support. But in their case, they didn't really feel that should happen altogether because they felt there was things that they wouldn't say, for example, in front of their children. And then the final person was really adamant that, they felt they should get support together with their loved one. And actually it caused them some stress to think about being separated. And there's an interesting comment there at the end. She needed my help, and even she said so, but the service didn't care about that. So it's like the service had actually separated out the family members, which they weren't happy about. So, these 3 quotes, I think, just really show the importance of offering choice and options for families so that they don't have to go with a one-size-fits-all approach. So, as I mentioned at the start, we wanted to test out the set of draft national principles in both a top-down and a bottom-up way. And in terms of the top-down aspect, we pulled out some key phrases from the draft principles as written, and we asked family members which were important to them. So that's shown on this slide. And we can see from this that there was a really high level of support for the principles as written, with all of them scoring over 50% of support and many well in excess of that. And in the other category at the bottom, people mentioned things like, particular organisations who'd helped them, as well as the importance of the visibility and speed of support, or one-to-one support, and also outreach was mentioned there as well. And then in terms of a bottom-up approach, we asked family members to write down 3 words or phrases which described how family support made them feel. And in the event, they listed 372 words and phrases, which we then grouped into these 15 statements that are shown here. But we only used their words and we didn't reword or rephrase anything. And you can really note the complete avoidance of jargon in the words that families use themselves. But there's also lots of important parallels with the top-down as written principles, and some key differences. And some of the differences include family members talking about having a safe space, having backup, the importance of happiness, and words like love, care, and belonging, which maybe don't appear in too many policy documents. So what we did for each of the family engagement activities was we produced a table like this. And what we found was families are very clear about what matters to them and how good support looks and feels, and there's a really strong consensus. So I'm not going to go into this table in any depth, but for each of the family engagement activities we carried out, we captured how much families reflected what was already in the draft principles in the left-hand column and what they added, which was different, in the right-hand column. And this particular table rather, is from the survey findings. And our full report on Ask the Family shows the tables for each activity if you're interested in drilling down a little bit more. So when we launched our Ask the Family report in June, we also launched a virtual exhibition which brought together all of the family engagement activities we'd carried out with our partners. And I'm not going to have time to tour all of this today with you, but I'd really encourage you to have a good look afterwards and to share widely across your own networks. This is available for all. And I'm going to start this tour with a shorter film called A Tool Belt for Families. This film was made by Mel McPherson from My Support Day, which is a peer-led family support organisation in South Lanarkshire. And Mel was a partner in our Ask the Family project. And we also work together to deliver the All in the Family collaborative family support service in South Lanarkshire. And Mel is a woman of many talents, but amongst these is filmmaking, and she created this fantastic animation. My Support Day uses a tool belt analogy when talking with family members about the difference that family support can make to their lives, so they understand it's about building their own knowledge, skills, confidence and capacity. Now the animation runs for about 5.5 minutes. There is sound attached, so I can't see anybody just now, so please burst in and shout at me if you can't hear the sound, but I'll just play it now.
your honey bee. Open up your fruit cage where the fruit is as sweet as can be. I wanna be your sunshiner. Why don't you call my name? You better call the sunshiner. Be my testimony. I'm your sunshiner. Let there be no doubt about it. Scrooge, Scrooge, I get it right. I keep the habit, shed my skin. This is the new stuff. I go night singing. Oh, won't you show for me? I will show for you. Please show for me. I will show for you. Yeah, 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 yeah. Only you. You be coming through. I'm gonna feel that power. I feel that power. Come on, help me through. Come on, help me through. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'll be feeding the river. I'll be feeding the river. What we do is good.
So there's just so much power and hope, I think, in that 5.5 minutes. It's quite incredible how much was squeezed into that time. So Mel, along with her colleague Lisa and my colleague Laurie Lee, formed the All in the Family Support Service in South Lanarkshire, and they worked with their family support group to develop this family guide to support. And as with the animation, this really helps explain to families about how family support is life-changing. But the audience for this is also those who make decisions about family support, for example, policymakers and commissioners. And many of the themes in this document echo the themes from our Ask the Family survey around the difficulties in accessing support and the benefits of good support for families. And I particularly like the appendix on the family support as a lifeline document, where it's like a translator from political or professional jargon to families' language. So I'd really encourage you to delve into the Ask the Family website and dig out that document. Really, really helpful. The next part of our virtual exhibition is called Let Us Reach Out. And it's a poem which was produced by a family about their family support worker from Action for Children. And it was actually produced as a written poem, and then my colleague Rebecca Bradley converted it into this lovely animation with very uplifting images and music. And I know we're absolutely not supposed to have favourites, but this is definitely one of mine from our whole Ask the Family exhibition. I just find it really powerful and moving. So it speaks for itself, so I'll just let it play now, and it runs for just over 2 minutes. And again, it's such a powerful animation, and I love that phrase about, you know, sometimes needing a proverbial shove. You know, families are saying they don't want things to be sugar coated, they don't want to be mollycoddled, you know, but they want workers to get right alongside them and really sort of help them face the situation they're in. Really, really fantastic. So this next part of the exhibition is a family word cloud, and this was designed by a dad who was also supported by Action for Children. And it reflects what you know, the dad and his family felt made up good family support. And so they captured like the skills and qualities they wanted to see in their workers, as well as the knowledge base they expected workers to have. So it's almost like a job description for your perfect family support worker. And again, you can see so many of those similar themes coming through about the importance of honesty and assertiveness, you know, to the point of being blunt, of recognizing people's trauma, and of trust and working as a team with families. So again, that was very prevalent in the poem that we just saw, you know, about not speaking on behalf of families, but getting right alongside them and working as a team. And this dad in particular spoke about how much he appreciated being called mate by the worker who was supporting the family, and of a level of self-disclosure by the worker. So, you know, this theme was picked up elsewhere in Ask the Family, where family members really talked about how much they value the humanity of good workers. And that seems, in a way, ridiculous to say we want our workers to be human. But, you know, people can see right through a kind of robotic or automatic response, and they really want to see that personal connection and that humanity, the humanity of the relationship. That came through so powerfully from this family. Okay, it's time, I have to say, for another earworm tune here, so I'm going to apologise in advance. This tune will stay with you. This is a fantastic animation produced by children, supported by Action for Children's Dundee Family Service. And it really highlights the importance of fun and laughter in family support. So you'll see that's quite a theme through the exhibition pieces. You know, it's not all about doom and gloom and weeping and wailing, but families, you know, can be supported so much through fun, through laughter, through friendship. And also this animation shows how children really highly value play and taking part in family type activities rather than something that might look like a service. So this runs for just under 2 minutes. So much that's important, excuse me, so much that's important to children is just the normality of life, and I think that comes through really strongly there. So next we're moving on to our conversation cafe, and my colleague Daryl McLeister hosted this online family conversation cafe as part of the family engagement project. And so it was a chance to fairly informally talk through, you know, what family support means to people. And in these comments here, you can see that family support is literally life-saving for some. You know, the comment there, support stopped me taking my own life, as well as the value of connection, space, release, and learning new techniques such as boundary setting. And the original plan was to spend time at the Conversation Cafe adding comments to this Padlet, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Padlet format, but basically it's like a kind of online post-it note system where you can just add more comments under certain themes. And we wanted to get feedback on all of the different parts of the draft principles. Actually, on the day, we ran out of time to do that at the time. So we asked people to go online to our Padlet that was already set up after the event and fill it in afterwards. And actually, on reflection, that was probably actually a better approach because people then had the time and space to reflect, and we got loads of really insightful comments. So again, you can look at the Padlet and drill right down into on our online exhibition space. Okay, moving on now to It's Good to Talk. And we'd also asked our own Scottish Families Young Persons Project, Roots, if they would like to feed into the Family Engagement Project. And of course, because they're young people, they chose to do a TikTok, which even in saying, I always feel I sound a bit like an ancient High Court judge. But this was recorded, this little TikTok was recorded at a time when we were largely in lockdown earlier on this year. And I just think the joy on the young people's faces and actually being together to film this is brilliant. And you can also hear it was quite a windy day. This runs for just under 30 seconds.
Hi, my name's Amy. My mum abuses drugs and I just feel really alone and rejected, like I have no one to talk to. That's when I met Claire from Scottish Families, and I feel like I have someone to talk to who understands what I'm going through. I can tell her anything and she still won't judge me. That's when she told me there's other young people that I can work with that go through the same as me. That's when I met Ashley and Chloe, and I finally felt like I have friends and someone to talk to who understand me and go through the same stuff as me. Thanks to them, I've learned it's good to talk.
So really short and sweet, and yeah, as I say, just fantastic to see the young people actually physically being together, and that's been one of the fantastic things about Roots, you know, supporting young people to make those friendships and relationships with other young people who absolutely know what they're going through. So next I'm moving on to a lovely letter written by a young person supported by Circles Family Service. And this young person and her parents are supported by the same family support worker, but they each get their own support from the worker. And I think that really reflects back on the definitions of whole family support that we talked about in our survey. So in this case, the whole family is being supported, but not necessarily at the same time or in the same way, even though it's the same person who's supporting them. And what we really loved about this letter was the way the young person talks so positively about her worker and what she likes about him, but also the way she can really see how her parents are benefiting from the support as well. And that also helps her. And we know that feeling listened to is massively important for young people. And I know that myself as a parent of teenagers, and so often they feel overlooked and ignored. So moving on this time to an audio clip called What Makes Good Family Support. And this is another young person supported by Circle. And again, this reflects many of the themes we've heard so far and includes them commenting on how hard it is to be constantly asked to share their life story and get nothing back from services. And it runs for just under 40 seconds.
Having a good worker is really important. You need to be able to trust the worker and feel that you can open up to them and relate to them. They need to be friendly, and my worker is funny, which helps. Getting good support has meant that I notice I feel better and the way I deal with situations in my life is better. Being supported by someone who is able to give advice and feedback when I ask for it otherwise. I feel like I tell them my life story and get nothing back. Be able to share some personal experiences of things that have helped me so I don't feel like I'm the only one who finds things hard sometimes.
I think it comes through so strongly there about the difference between any old support and good support, and the young person really talking about, you know, having that bond, the good relationship, you know, with their worker. They think they're funny. That really helps them connect. And in contrasting that to the kind of services, which, you know, it just feels like they're constantly interrogating you and nothing changes. So I'm going to finish the virtual tour part of this talk with a chat about family support. And this document came from exchanges between family members and their workers, again in the Circle service, about what makes good and bad family support. And as well as what they value about support and the words they would use to describe it. So much of this chimes again with our survey and with the other family engagement activities. And I really think all of the Ask the Family project really demonstrates the tremendous skill set of good family support workers. So we know that evidence-based family support is about change for families, not just chatting about what's going on, but about truly understanding it and learning new ways to respond. And of course, there's a value in friendship groups where people just meet for a cup of tea and a blether. But that's not the same as practitioner-based family support, which is using evidence-based interventions. And we know many areas of Scotland where they say there's family support in place, but actually it's maybe, you know, a group of parents who've just been meeting together for years and supporting each other. And it's really valuable and it has its place. But without evidence-based practice and interventions, nothing's necessarily going to change for those parents over the many years. And often they're still in exactly the same place, sharing exactly the same war stories, as one family member put it. So when we concluded our Ask the Family project and we reported it back to the National Working Group and from there on to the government, we concluded that family members generally use really different words than policymakers and practitioners, and we should make sure that we reflect that sort of family-friendly language in what we produce. But, you know, positively, families were in the large part supportive of the content and the draft principles, and, you know, albeit they might word them slightly differently. And they also identified a number of additional principles which were really important to them. You know, I've already talked about this, workers showing their human side, honestly challenging them and being what they called invested in helping, offering a safe space to open up in a trusted relationship. And so importantly, that freedom from stigma and judgment and working holistically with the whole family. Also, workers' stickability was so important, that holding on and never giving up. There was definitely more focus on whole family aspects than the family inclusive practice respect and Ask the Family. But, you know, family members did continue to identify challenges around family inclusive practice. And so it is important that we don't lose the focus on that altogether. So what we produced in the end was 2 further sets of draft principles. This one shown here was, you know, what's important to families from the existing principles. You know, so things like addressing stigma and judgment, getting support in their own right, strengths-based support, which is accessible and available, the stickability of workers, as I've mentioned, and also trust. But we also produced a further table of additional principles which families said were really important to them. So, for example, connecting with other family members in the same situation, family inclusive practice, choice, support which leads to change, fun and friendship, and also humanity, which was such a theme in those exhibition pieces. So just to conclude the conclusions of Ask the Family, and then I'm going to briefly run through the actual national framework, which is just hot off the press, just published this week. So it's really vital, we said, that the principles aren't just applied to substance-related family support services, but actually to all services which come across families, you know, because families are bubbling up absolutely everywhere, not just in specialist services. And we felt there was loads and loads of evidence of really strong whole family approach and family inclusive practice work in Scotland, but it definitely takes a long time to find it or to find the right kind of support. And as one family member said, there simply isn't enough of it to go around. And although investment wasn't the focus of this project, it was really an obvious point that significant additional resources are required to make sure we can ramp up family support to a higher level. And we need to improve reach, visibility and speed. So, and I've just said there, peer support, of course, is so valuable for families, but that doesn't mean everything needs to be provided by peers. It's that it's part of all the options on offer for families, as well as practitioner-led and fellowship support. So we used the publication of Ask the Family in June this year to call for significant, sustained and strategic investment in family support. And we feel there is a real opportunity to do this now in Scotland, alongside the investments that are going on in treatment and care for individuals using alcohol and drugs. And before I quickly talk about what happened next, I just wanted to note my thanks to all the children, young people and adult family members who took part in Ask the Family, and my fantastic and uber creative collaborators at Action for Children, All in the Family and Circle, and as well as the National Working Group for commissioning us to do this project and for making sure that family voices and experiences were right at the heart of the new National Whole Family Approach framework. So what happened next? Well, not much for a few months, if I'm honest, but hot off the press on the 8th of December was Scotland's new Families Affected by Drug and Alcohol Use framework. So the National Whole Family Approach framework has now been published, and the link is there on the screen. And this was launched by Angela Constance, who's Scotland's Minister for Drug Policy. So Scotland appointed its first ever Minister for Drug Policy in December last year in response to the ongoing challenges around drug deaths in particular. And interestingly, in launching the whole family framework, it was not only Angela Constance's signature that was in the document, but it was definitely a cross-government sign-off. And I think that's really, really important. And the Minister for Public Health and Children and Young People and Mental Wellbeing were all co-signatories to the whole family approach. So that really recognises it's about a system change for families, which is really going to have the impact. And we were really pleased to see that Ask the Family is threaded right the way through the whole family framework. You know, it gets lots of mentions, and even in launching the framework, the Minister referred to our finding about this average of 11 people harmed for each individual using substances. We also got the chance to provide a press comment, and the Daily Record ran a story which really focused on the whole family workforce, which we need in Scotland now. And again, we were able to share some of our findings from Ask the Family as part of this, and say that this is a great opportunity, you know, to kickstart local and national investment in whole family support. So the framework is incredibly comprehensive. You'll be glad to know I'm not going to wade through it at this point, but it's very much targeted on alcohol and drug partnerships, who are the local strategic planning bodies for alcohol and drug services, including family support in Scotland, and they're based in every single local area. And also there's definitions around whole family approaches and family inclusive practice, and it talks about the need for partnership and collaboration. So this is very much targeted at alcohol and drug partnerships, but actually there's actions within it for a whole range of different bodies. And within the framework, there's really 5 key areas for change which are identified. The first one is around culture. And as we all know, I love this phrase, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it's really important we do develop a different culture, which is about, you know, everything that Ask the Family was talking about, just that consistent, high quality approach. The next key area for change is services. You know, the quote here is a quote directly from Rights, Respect and Recovery, you know, about this kind of rights-based approach. You know, families have got the right to health and the right to life free from the harms of drugs and so on. But we know that these rights don't feel real for families on the ground. And so we need to see change in services to bring that about. It's always about the money, isn't it? So, you know, resources are also important, and it's good to see the whole family framework identify that, you know, this is a priority for investment. Partnership working, I've already mentioned, is really a theme through the framework, and just making sure that, you know, whenever they bubble up, if you like, families can get the support that they need. And then finally, workforce. You know, these are all such easy phrases to say about being trauma informed, compassionate and so on, being family inclusive, developing trusting relationships. But these are highly skilled roles, and, you know, it is important that we invest and develop our workforce to be able to support families appropriately. So that is the end of my slides. Thanks so much again for the opportunity to be part of the webinar today, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your excellent talk. And before we move to the discussion, I just wanted to say that the AFINet website also is a repository for materials. And I just saw that you've got lots of apparently excellent materials that I think would really suit IDEAL on the website. So it would be great if you could provide them. And I just saw that Therese Collins already started with, well, several questions, but I think probably we should start with these ones, and I'll just read them out loud. And if you want to add something afterwards, Therese, you can go ahead. It's did they give any examples of how help is free of stigma and judgment? Does your agency actively try to avoid certain words like codependency and enabling? Do you do anything else to help ensure workers are avoiding judgment? Is the 5-step method a part of your program in any way?
Oh, lots of questions in that. So I'll start with the last one first. The main program that we use with families is CRAFT, Community Reinforcement and Family Training. We probably use aspects of 5-step, but there is some interest within the team in developing that in more detail. And that's particularly come about from our Holding On service, which is for families whose loved ones are at high risk of drug-related harm and death. And just being introduced to some of the concepts in 5-step, which I think was through an AFINet, earlier AFINet webinar. You know, the team were saying they're interested in some of those kind of alternatives to CRAFT or sitting alongside CRAFT. And also some of the team are trained in SMART, family and friends. So there's aspects of that we're going to be building as well. So I think what we like, again, is about having this kind of menu of options for families, but all evidence-based interventions. And also using other evidence-based interventions, you know, like advocacy and, you know, things like that as well. So we're not wedded to only using family support interventions. It's interesting you've asked the question about stigma and judgment. So when we did this Ask the Family project, the family members who were involved in the engagement activities were supported by third sector providers, so the ones who I mentioned are partners in this, and they are all very much kind of stigma-free organisations. It's very much about getting alongside families. So when families were more critical, they were really talking about their interactions with statutory agencies. You know, I have to be honest and say social work didn't come out of it very well. And a lot of feeling, nor did alcohol and drug treatment services, where family members had tried to get involved. So they had a lot of experiences of being judged and being stigmatized, and indeed being blamed for their loved one's addiction. And I do find that some of that sort of adverse childhood experiences or ACEs agenda falls into that sometimes, because it's quite an easy narrative for individuals as well to say, well, you know, I'm using these substances because it's all my mum's fault or it's all the way I was brought up. And I think there is a clear link between trauma and substance use, but a lot of people use substances who are not traumatized. A lot of people use substances who are not in deprived areas. And I think our experience at Scottish Families is substance harm goes right across Scottish society. It's in every kind of family, all kind of family makeup, you know, all kind of communities. And I think we need to get that conversation much more out there and not always be narrowing down, oh, these are the types of families who are affected by substance harm, because I think then that closes off families from thinking this is about them. And I think it's important to reflect, or it's interesting to reflect, there's lots of really successful, high-profile people who've been brought up in families where there's substance use. So I think, you know, it can be used, particularly with children, as a kind of almost like a deterministic, you know, thing that, oh, you're definitely not going to amount to anything and your life's never going to, you're never going to achieve very much. And I think we really need to challenge that, because if families have got the right support in place, and again, we're using those evidence-based interventions, you know, outcomes can be really, really different for people. I don't know if that's answered all of your, I don't think my staff would use words like codependency and enabling, but they would help family members understand, you know, through CRAFT, what's really going on, because family members will do a lot, as you know, to kind of downplay or ignore or kind of explain away what's going on. So there's a big kind of opening of the box and really understanding that, and it's so eye-opening to family members just being exposed to that sort of supportive exploration of what's going on, and then introducing a whole range of practical tips and tools for changing what's going on.
Okay, Therese also mentioned that the opioid epidemic that arose from the pain pill issues brought families into this world that might not have ever been there here. But I see also Jim Orford raised his hand, and I'm sure he's got another question or comment.
Right. I mean, first of all, Justina, thank you so much for really an inspiring talk. I really enjoyed your shorter talk at the conference we had back in September. So it was really nice to be able to hear you talk about what you've been doing and the project's been doing at greater length, and lots of stuff there, really. I mean, I suppose a general question I've got, I was really interested in the finding that so many people defined whole family support not in terms of the family all sitting down together doing exactly the same thing, but members of the family having the support that they individually needed. And I thought that was really, really significant. And I just wonder what implications that has for the organization of services. I mean, you mentioned, for example, the importance of evidence-based types of therapy like CRAFT, 5 steps, SMART, and so on. But isn't there a sense in which, in a way, a lot of those approaches assume that they know the kind of support that the whole family wants? And isn't there, could you argue that if you were starting a service from scratch, you'd be better not to start with the evidence-based, theory-based things which psychologists and others have come up with, but rather from the first principles that you've been discovering in your work? And also related to that, is there also an argument for saying that services are better run in the third charitable sector rather than in the state National Health Service or whatever the state system is in a country? What would you say to that?
Well, as the CEO of a charity, I'm obviously going to always be shouting the corner of the third sector, but we do need all sectors to be playing their part, and there's a role for statutory intervention, there's a role for statutory support as well. But I think it's partnership between the agencies is a really important thing. And you're absolutely right. The way that services are designed is not in a whole family way at all. So the way that services are commissioned and funded, well, certainly in Scotland, is you've got, one lot of services for kind of children. You've got a different lot of services, well, not very many services for adults. You've got a different set of services for individuals using substances. And these services are very rarely even co-located, never mind actually delivered in partnership. So there's all of these different people coming into families, but actually, in most cases, there's nobody coming in at all because families are not supported by anybody in any direction. So we know that most people using alcohol and drugs are not engaging with, formal statutory alcohol and drug treatment services. We know a huge number of families are missed from family support. And going back to Teresa's comment before about kind of drug trends, consistently in our helpline at Scottish Families, the top 3 concerns are alcohol, followed by cocaine, crack cocaine, and then street benzos, with your kind of opiates and so on further down the list, along with cannabis and so on. But you look at where services are directed, and it's not at all in that direction, or where statutory family services might be, have obvious concerns about a family, is much more likely to be where there's opiate use or extremely serious alcohol use rather than, other levels of alcohol use or cocaine use and so on. So there's so much family harm that is hidden from view altogether. But, I totally agree. We need to completely rethink how we're supporting families. And I think what the third sector is doing well, the services we worked with in this project, they are supporting whole families, even sometimes through the same worker, but family members are getting their own support within that. They're not sitting in a sort of family therapy type setup. It's much more about individually assessing where everyone is, and siblings can be in a different place from each other. Men and women might need different kinds of support. There's definitely different support for somebody using substances and some, the non-substance using family member. So it is a real rethink, I think, coming from this whole family framework. And it's not going to be an overnight fix, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. And since I see no questions at the moment, I just hop on Jim's question. And please correct me if I got it wrong, but it also deals with, the evidence-based principles and so on. And I just wondered, as far as I did understood your talk correctly, I rather would say one of the core issues mentioned by the family members was that probably the most important experience they made were rather something like healing relationships. And so thinking of what we know from psychotherapy research, I just wonder if all the programs most likely come second, So the basis is, especially for family members to get rid of all these shame, stigma, and other narratives that are still in the world. And if there is this kind of healing relationship where you feel accepted and so on, then probably some rather, tools or whatever you might call it come into play. But so, so this also is, for example, I personally I'm rather convinced that craft has a lot of really almost universal tools, but I'm not so convinced that it's the right issue for everyone. And so I just wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I mean, I totally agree. I think there's no one size fits all for any of this, and it's always about going in, to where the family is at that point and starting from there rather than, sort of academically imposing a framework that you think has got to be right for everybody. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that a huge part of tackling stigma and judgment for family members has actually been meeting others in the same situation. And, a lot of people are very reticent to join any sort of group type support, and partly because they've got a real preconceived ideas of what a family support group would be like. Everybody's sitting around weeping and wailing. And, I think when people can be supported to go to family support, they're pleasantly surprised at, how enjoyable it is, the friendships they make, just that common bond. And I think that can go such a long way to making people to just sort of diminishing that stigma and judgment that they feel. And also the way that workers interact on a one-to-one basis with families. Our workers would never judge families. It's very much about understanding where people are at. Not, there's so much unhelpful advice is given by people around them about what they think they should do. And I think, again, that getting alongside the family and kind of jointly problem solving is a much more effective approach.
Okay, thanks. And since I still see no hands raised or further questions, and Therese is still writing, I just get into the next issue, which you also mentioned, which I personally think is really important, that you try to develop new ways of reaching out to family members, like including GPs and so on. And since I'm rather convinced that we reach, say less than 1,000 of family members affected, have you already made some experiences by these strategies? Are there any things you would recommend where you would say they worked well?
Yeah, well, if anybody's got the answer to this question, they will become a very wealthy person, I think, because there's no easy answers about how to reach family members. And I think, the numbers of families supported by Scottish families has increased over the years. Part of that is us just making a lot more noise, I think, about the families agenda, trying to get more profile for the issues. What we find is alcohol and drug treatment services where that families are engaging at the minute during COVID times. They're not actually physically seeing so many family members because so much support is virtual or kind of restricted, but actually they're not ever seeing family members in their heads, to think, right, here comes somebody, where's their family, let's link them in. So, with GPs and police officers and, everybody who's engaging with families, we're on a kind of constant communications mission to get them to think family. They don't need to worry about all the different services that are out there. If they can just link family members to our helpline, if they're in Scotland, then, we will do the work of seeing what's in the person's local area, what support do they need, can we link them into any of our services, are there other providers, so we just want people to see the family and to connect them into Scottish families, and then we can do the rest at our end. But it's very challenging, not least because of all the stigma and judgment that stops family members disclosing what's going on within their family.
Okay, and I see Jim has raised his hand again, but probably before I hand over to Jim, there's also another question which I think suits in with what you just answered by Holly. Did you have any difficulty reaching families in rural areas? If so, how did you address these areas differently? Or how would you address them differently in the future?
Well, when we did the survey, because that was online, it actually could go everywhere. But as I said in my presentation, we managed not to reach anybody in any of the island health board authorities. So there were rural areas who responded, but not island authorities. And that did make us think that we needed to be more proactive and sort of more proactive in our outreach to those communities. But I think that has been, I don't think there's many benefits of COVID, but I think one of the benefits we can see is the move of much of our work to a virtual platform, and we're able to connect much more easily with families in the kind of outer reaches of Scotland's communities. We're not expecting people to travel to Glasgow or somewhere else in the centre to access our events or our development opportunities and so on. Everybody can link in from wherever they are, and so we have really seen an increase in engagement from more remote and rural areas, which is really welcome.
Okay, so I'll hand over to Jim.
Right. Yes. I mean, this question of reaching out is such a fundamental question, isn't it? Really, if we could reach out to more people, that would really be so important. I just wondered what your thoughts were about online ways of reaching people. I mean, I have in my mind this fantasy of some national television drama which features families affected by alcohol or drug problems, with an online, an online address on the screen at the end of the television drama, and the hundreds of people who would contact this online this online address in the days following. I mean, is your feeling that online forms of reaching out to people are going to be useful or not, in view of what you found about the importance of the relationship? A lot of what you said about what people appreciate is the relationship with the person who provides them with support. That might suggest that online is probably not going to be successful. So that's my main question. But just while I've got the opportunity, are you considering including gambling in what the project and the national framework does?
I would have to check the framework closely to see any reference to gambling, but that's definitely not I don't think that's a focus of it. And a lot of the organisations that support families, they will look at gambling as part of that. I know my own team have done some training around gambling awareness and so on, but it's not a primary focus for us at this point. In terms of the online aspect, I think quite a lot of our own assumptions have been challenged about what works for families. And for many years, we've delivered a telehealth service, which is one-to-one over the phone. It was always offered via video conferencing as well, but that wasn't particularly taken up until COVID, and then everybody's on Zoom and Teams and so on. And not only have families got more comfortable with that format, but so have we as a team. So, already we did offer a lot of virtual support. And we found through our helpline there was already a move away from phone-based, voice-based contact towards alternatives like non-voice, particularly web chat, but also email and text and so on. And during COVID, that has just skyrocketed. So I don't have the latest stats in my head, but around about 4/5 of our helpline contacts are non-voice, and only around 1/5 are people on the phone, which maybe slightly flies in the face of what you think around a helpline. And certainly through the helpline and through telehealth, we have absolutely fantastic feedback on the quality of the relationship that people build up, and the quality of the support they feel that they're getting. And I think for a lot of people, it's just convenient. You know, we talked during COVID about the difficulty having a private conversation when everybody was in the house together, whereas you can sit on one end of the sofa on a web chat to a support service such as ours. You know, the person you're concerned about sitting further down the sofa is, you know, none the wiser about the fact you're actually reaching out for support because it's all just through a web chat. So there's lots and lots of advantages of virtual. I would say the group that, again, this maybe flies in the face of expectations, but the group who are least enthusiastic about virtual support are actually our young persons project. And they really hated all the kind of Zoom support, despite the best efforts of, you know, the team to be doing, you know, keep fit and, you know, TikTok classes and cooking, online cooking, and they did engage and, you know, they had fun, but actually they could not wait to return to face-to-face support because they can connect with each other through that. And, you know, I feel that myself as well. You know, all workers are spending a lot of time on Zoom and Teams and so on just now. And it's so different than being in a room with people and able to have that. You know, you can still have a relationship with people and connect, but actually it is quite different than the in-person contact. So I think we've learned a lot during COVID around virtual support, but also importantly, we've grown our own confidence around it as well, and our own skill set, to be honest.
I just see that Therese also commented that this may be cultural overall, as people seem to prefer text over talking, at least in the US. And I just wonder if this probably also might be associated with stigma, because if you just text something, you do not need to disclose yourself. And I got quite a lot of contact with people engaged in self-help groups in Germany, and they told me that on the one hand, there are people who feel it's easier to join a group in a video format. But of course, they also sometimes I've got problems that people just sneak in, you know, and I I just wonder, you mentioned that family members said anyone should get help depending upon their personal needs. And probably we should also provide help offers very individualized with very varying formats, because I also recall in our research that we met family members who were reluctant to join groups and to exchange with others because they feared this might be too overwhelming for them. And others just mentioned, well, this was, it felt so good to exchange with others with similar problems. So I think, again, it's not one size fits all, but probably a more diverse strategy might be useful. And I think you you did a big move, at least for Scotland, into the right direction. I do not see any more raised hands or questions in the chat. So, and since we're not a real large group anymore, so I would like to take the opportunity to thank you very much for your excellent talk. And as you can see by the discussion, it's been very stimulating. If there is anyone still here who has not yet become an AFINet member, I'd strongly recommend you to become one, since membership is free. And we'll continue our webinar series in January, and I think at the moment we got webinars planned for until June next year, and we will continue. So, and we won't have a summer break. We just decided. So hopefully we'll meet again in January. Until then, I wish you all a peaceful and healthy festive season and good move to a next year, which hopefully will be less pandemic than the last 2 years have been. And again, thank you very much. And it would be great if we could get some materials from you for the repository, and good success for your further work.
Thanks so much. Lovely to see everybody. Thank you.
Okay. And of course, thanks to Alex for providing the technical platform.
Yes.
And without her, all these webinars wouldn't be possible. So thank you very much, and see you in January.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.